Assalamualaikum. Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. And thank you to Ali and the Bach Launch team for hosting always these amazing conversations. My name is Kalsoom Lakhani. I'm the co-founder and general partner at iDive Ventures. And I am so honored and privileged to be moderating this conversation today with the great Raghib Hussain. It's an incredible honor and a privilege. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Raghib. For those who don't know, I'll just give the too long didn't read version of his bio. And then we're going to dig into a lot of deep stuff into his journey and what led to the acquisitions, like things that's keeping him up at night right now. Feel free, if you have questions, to drop them in the chat throughout the conversation. I will do my best to get to as many questions as possible because obviously this is an exciting hour that we have in front of us right now. So welcome, Raghib. Basically, for those who don't know, Raghib Hussain, his company Cavium, which he co-founded in 2001 at 28 years old, I believe you were. So under 30, so Forbes 30 under 30, hopefully that happened back then. That company that he founded in 2001 and co-founded was basically then went public just 6 years later and was recently acquired by Marvell Technologies in 2017 for $6.7 billion. So arguably the largest exit by a Pakistani founder ever. So huge deal right now. And right now today, Raghib is actually the president of products and technologies at Marvell. So we're going to get into that journey, but actually one thing that's been, I think what's something that's so interesting, and I definitely went into a rabbit hole of watching all of Raghib's past interviews, is his actual personal story is really interesting. Raghib is from Karachi. He's number 10 of 12 children, went to NED. And I really kind of wanted to dig into this because in some of your past interviews, you talk often about the importance of education, right? The importance of education, of breaking a cycle, breaking through a ceiling. But so much of what you've also talked about is the fact that you also did a lot of learning on your own as a kid in Karachi and like what you taught yourself. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like what was that self-learning journey for you and how did that education differ from what you learned in the classroom?
Yeah, so thank you, Kalsoom. I believe education, this is my personal belief that education is needed to grow in any angle in life. So it's not only for your career growth, but also your personal growth, your knowledge actually is determined. It pretty much builds your personality. In my family, luckily, we all understood the importance of education because we believed, the education is the only way that help us, grow in financially as well as, as a human being. So there was very much focus on the education. At that time, of course, I was not in like a elite school or any such thing, and access to good quality of education was difficult. But I believe the very same thought that it is difficult drove us to learn on our own. So I was throughout my life, I have been always looking for books, various kind of books, and wherever I can get any interesting thought or which can intrigue my thinking process. So that's what I have been doing. I still do, by the way. I still read books on a regular basis, and I believe that is a good source of knowledge. And we are only limited by our knowledge, which is sounds kind of oxymoron. I mean, people think, okay, knowledge is what you enable you. I say it differently. I say we are only limited by what we know because we make our impression of things based on our knowledge. So the less the knowledge, the wrong will be our image of the world. The more the knowledge, the better will be the image. So that is why I always focus on that. It has helped me in every aspect in life.
Yeah, there's actually a really great book by Tara Westover called Uneducated. And it's this idea of we constantly absorb what we're being told our whole lives, and to actually break that down and to think about like how we actually become really educated. It requires you to kind of go out of your comfort zone. And I think one thing that when you were mentioning, it was making me think that sounds like you were just a very curious person, and you still are today, right? So for someone to seek knowledge outside of what's being given to you, really kind of requires a level of curiosity.
it is very important from my point of view, because whatever knowledge is given to you is based on the limitation of the knowledge of that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of perception of that person. And especially, I mean, if these are like a scholarly thing or a philosophy thing, which is from 100 years, 1,000 years back, it was in the context of that time and that circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So then you need to really look into from that angle and then apply it and evolve it. So it's a constant process in my mind to keep gaining from experiences of others, but then keep applying in your area and see how can you morph your thought process based on that. And I have always been kind of not very fan of the structural, education system. And in fact, now history in the overall system is proving that it is not really needed. Especially COVID has changed the thinking process, how education should be. So I never depended on only the textbook to learn thing. I always believe in whatever books can you get hold of, you should try to gain knowledge to that.
Can you give an example of a book that maybe you read when you were younger that really kind of altered that worldview that you had?
So interesting enough, so I was, my father was a poet by himself, and I was too much into poetry. So I read a lot of Allama Iqbal's poetry, and in fact that was very inspiring and kind of drove me in doing various things in life. It's a very, very deep thought and I would say very inspiring poetry.
I love that, because I mean, you went, the engineering route, but to think about like literature and poetry kind of being part of your education probably gave you such a really interesting lens, even as an engineer. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, you did your BS in engineering from NAD in Karachi, but a few years later, you actually moved to San Jose, California to do your master's in computer engineering. So what drove you at the time to come to the US to study? And, I would love to learn a little bit more about that decision, as well as, what that US education gave you.
Yeah, so at the time when I did my engineering, my thought process was always, on being the producer rather than consumer, right? And what I looked at the engineering landscape over there at that time in my field, mostly it was users of the application. I mean, I could get a good job, let's say in a bank or something, but what you are doing, you're really using the application which are created by somebody else, and you are more of a consumer. Most of the jobs over there and most of the things for consumer. Again, getting back to Iqbal, apni duniya aap paida kar agar zindon mein. So I always wanted to be the creator rather than consumer, right? So I heard about this area which is called Silicon Valley, and it kind of increased my curiosity. Why is it called Silicon Valley? I always thought at that time that real engineering is the hardware engineering, which is wrong, but somehow I had this perception. And I moved as a result of that, I moved from software to firmware to board level design and finally chip design, because I had this, back in my mind that a real stuff is really the processor which makes it all happen, which is true, but it doesn't mean that other things are not important. So that actually made me think that I should come to Silicon Valley. I mean, my friends who return back from Silicon Valley, they say it's the heaven for engineers. So that was my thought. But of course, I could not afford to go to Silicon Valley. So this is where I kind of found an opportunity where I worked for a American company who were, who wanted to open an office in Karachi, and I joined them, and that's how I came to United States.
Great. And for you, like, Silicon Valley is, sounds like such a utopia for people that are coming to the US, right? And especially for engineers. And this was, I'm assuming, in the 90s, right? When you came to Silicon Valley. So what was it like for you back then? What did Silicon Valley look like? And how do you feel like the decision, founding Cavium you were in San Jose, which is where you moved to, like, what was, for you moving to the US, how did that impact the decision to even eventually launch, Cavium in the first place? Like, how was being around all of that influential to you?
So I would say in 90s, it was very important for me to understand the way how things work, to be here. Because at that time, remember, we did not have search engine, we did not have Google. Access to information was not as easy as it is today. Similarly, the overall venture capitalist, the overall ecosystem was not anywhere else in the world except Silicon Valley at that time. Now, of course, there are so many all over the world, and Pakistan also has many such VCs. So for me, being here helped me to understand that whole ecosystem, how those things work, and really access to knowledge, access to various kind of information was much easier being here. And meeting people who were dealing with a similar problem, understanding what our RFCs are, I did not even know before I came here. And in fact, hanging out with those people, working with those people, and understanding, hey, this is how technology is generally has been advancing, and this is the best way to participate in that advancement.
Amazing. So I did some Googling. You just mentioned Google. And so now Google is obviously very ubiquitous. It's the first thing you do when you meet someone to figure out, when I was doing research on you. And basically when I was on Cavium's Wikipedia, it said in a very mysterious way that you and your co-founder, Syed B. Ali, were actually introduced by a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, which sounds very, very mysterious. But can you share more about how the two of you came together? And this person that you met through someone else, Syed B. Ali, ultimately became your partner in this journey. Why did you feel that you guys could build a company together?
That's a very interesting question. So I was introduced. So when I decided that I have to do my own business, so it was not that I exactly knew what needed to be done and so on and so forth. So I kept working and kept trying various things, and there were multiple ideas before the Cavium ideas, and then every time we'll come with the idea with let's say few friends, go to the VCs, and we were not getting a good valuation, I should say, good attention, because we were like 20s and 27, 28 years old engineers and so on. We had no clue about how the businesses are built and run, right? We had never worked as on the business side. We were all engineering side and so on. So that was a big challenge. Actually Mudar Kothari, who actually convinced me to come to US, was the same person. He was a seed investor at that time, and he told me that, hey Raghib, the problem is that you do not have right kind of set of skills needed to get the good valuation. I had a term sheet, but it was not at a good value, right? So this is when he said, hey, I know a very good friend of mine, and he has a lot of experience on the business side, so let me introduce you. So that's how we got introduced. Now, of course, it's kind of interesting thing, but I would say it's from both sides. We kept working for some time together, and we kind of felt like that we can trust each other, and we can build something together. And I believe that worked out very well. And it has to be from both sides. To tell you the truth, I mean, only one side cannot make things work. And it's a give and take, and kind of from both sides, you have to do some compromises and understand other side, strengths and weaknesses, right? And I believe in my case, it was very good combination at that time. I trusted Syed's business side, and Syed trusted my technical side, and we worked together as a team, and that's what made us successful.
Yeah, it's like a marriage, right? Two people coming together and having communication.
I would say, yeah. I would say your business partner is even more than that, because you actually are working. I mean, we all truth. As a awake time, you spend more with your business partner than your life partner. That's kind of very important to have that trust relationship.
For sure. My partner Misbah and I joke that we talk to each other more than we talk to our actual husbands. So for them, but also that is the reality of building something together, right? So so I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into the journey of building Cavium over the years. And I think it's really easy, even when I did my introduction, but even when when you Google yourself, it's really easy to kind of parse everything into metrics and numbers, right? Cavium went public this year. You guys were acquired for this much amount. But I think, for founders that are in the room, I'm a founder myself, The day-to-day is so much harder. And I think it's really easy to look back and say that, these were the big things that we did. But I feel like the day-to-day journey is just so much harder. Sometimes it's harder to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And what I wanted to understand a little bit about, because it sounds like even, when you discuss your journey, that you weren't necessarily obsessed with an exit or taking it public as much as you were obsessed with the problem that you were trying to solve or building value. So I would love to kind of hear what drove that day-to-day journey at Cavium, and what do you feel that were the actual pieces that led to the success? So would love to break that down a little bit more.
That's a very interesting question. So as you just said, Kalsoom, our brains are very logical, and in retrospect, everything looks very logical and very as if everything was thought through in a very structured manner. Reality is not that way in reality. So the passion that I had, or I still have, is this: it's not about making money or selling the company or any such thing. I want to find a real problem and I want to solve it, and that's kind of, and doing in a very latest way, learning new technologies, applying new techniques to improve the overall efficiencies of the solution. That's what drives me. That still drives me the same way. So at Cavium, we looked at this problem of data infrastructure. So we kind of predicted that, hey, data will keep growing and more. And as it grows, the challenge of data processing will keep increasing more. So that was kind of a direction. But of course, again, in retrospect, it looks very logical, very obvious. At that time, it was not very obvious, because we knew with the internet, data is crossing boundaries, data is increasing, but it was hard to pinpoint which application of the data will be a challenge. But we were able to identify that security is going to be a problem. And that's how we started the company as a security processor company. But it's not like we are, sitting in isolation and thinking, oh, it's the problem. We work very closely with the customers and really understood their problem and came up with a solution which added value for them, right? All along, that has been in Cavium our I should say, principle that, hey, we work with the customer, we understand their problem, and we come up with a solution that serves their need, that improve the efficiency or make it easier or whatever it be. And I think that thesis has worked very well throughout. And in fact, I'm applying the same policy in Marvell as well. That we want to work closely with the customer. We want to co-invent, co-design product, and which actually adds value for them. And as a result of that, it generates business for us. Throughout Cavium, in fact, even starting from the second year, we had offers to sell it. And every time we got an offer, we looked at it, we said, no, we can do better than this, right? And as a result, we never sold. We kept working, and we kept growing the company. We kept growing the business. And the reason for that was that our goal was not to get a quick exit or make quick money. Our goal was to create a value for our customers, for our shareholders, for our employees, and that's what we focused on.
You speak about the need to create value a lot, like in the past talks that you've done and interviews. I'd love to unpack that a little bit more, right? Because I think creating value is also subjective in some ways, but also what are your values, right? Because the values of who you are oftentimes drive the way that the company moves throughout the years, right? And also, can you give an example of something that you did not do because it did not match with your values? So let's first start with, what are those values exactly? And then something that maybe you said no to because it didn't match the values of who you were, and as a result, who Cavium was.
So that's a very deep question, by the way. We can spend the entire hour.
We can. Let's do it.
Because my philosophies of values is a little bit more evolved. So when I said value earlier, I meant purely in the business term. What I mean by that is that, hey, something you're creating which is actually adding value to customer business. As a result of that, it is adding financial value, which actually helps everybody, right? Now, getting back to what is my thought about value. I mean, I believe there are no values except the one that you believe in. Now, of course, we have a reference of our in our life. The concept of value is our religion clearly defines it and so on. But having the knowledge of that definition is one thing, and believing in that is another thing. So I believe that belief is every individual's value is what they believe in, not what they were taught on or what they think of. It's a completely different topic, right? So when you believe in some value, it automatically drives your behavior. Your life becomes driven by those values. And I personally believe that the values that are common, that are good, is built in our nature. It's not like it is something which is completely strange. It's just that we need to pay attention and think through this in a little bit more detail. I mean, the basic values which we drive our culture, which we still drive, which is act with integrity and honesty, right? I would not think anybody in the world will disagree with that. It's just that many people do not believe to the depth of what does it mean, right? Or the value like, okay, treat everybody with respect, or help each other, sort of a thing, or help solve customer problems, sort of a thing. So those are the basic value, which I say is just common sense. If somebody thinks through what is the right thing to do, they will know what is the right thing to do. Whether they do it or not, that's a different story. I'll tell you an example of that. So there was a very big customer, and it was a very big design, but they had a very tight schedule of when they needed it. We did full analysis and we realized, okay, we cannot deliver to the timeline that they are looking for. Now, in our industry, the design time is so big. It's like 18 months. You could easily lie that, hey, yeah, we will do it and so on, and life is good. But again, we believe in building the business in the long term, and we believe in doing things, not one time, right? I mean, because if you lie once, ultimately that it will come out and everybody will know what you did, right? So instead we say, okay, we told the truth that, hey, we cannot meet your timeline that is scheduled that you are looking for. In fact, we lost the design as a result of that, which is true. But that kind of established the relationship that we have, the trust relationship. Yes, we lost that design, but over the last, I would say 10, 15 years, we have gotten a lot more design from the same customer. So because we were able to establish this, the trust relationship, we still have a very good trust relationship with the same customer. So yes, at times it felt very bad.
Yeah.
That's it. Now we lost such a big design. But if you look at this retrospect of like over 10 years, it looks beautiful actually.
And I think it's important to state that, right? Of like how important it was that you chose to stick to your values versus giving in to a customer and something that didn't match with that. Because at the end of the day, like, I think having that sense of, or that thinking around abundance, that there's going to be more opportunities in the future, or this is going to open up something else. Maybe you didn't think that at the time, but at the end of the day, because you stuck to your values, that's what it created.
So I believe, I agree with you. It was very difficult. To tell you the truth, there were many thoughts that, hey, things happen, this things will move and so on. The customer may also fill the schedule and so on. But that disconnect was big over there. We could not just hide it, right? And as a result of that, we had to make a decision that, hey, no, we will. And it felt bad. It felt bad at that time, really bad. But later on, proven to be the right decision.
We have so many questions that are amazing that are coming in, and a few specifically that are kind of around, the Cavium journey specifically. So I'm going to start turning to the questions and then also continuing back to, my questions. But these two together actually are quite good. So Mohammed Athar and Shahid Majid both ask questions about the low points, right? So Mohammed Athar says, what was your lowest point in the journey and how did you come out of it? And then Shahid asks to also talk about your failures and your struggles in the early days of Cavium. How did you overcome those challenges?
So I would say, in a business term, there is something called reservation value, right? And normally it is used in negotiation where you negotiate, hey, at what point you will walk away, sort of a thing, right? So that's called reservation value. I think throughout my life, what has helped me is to keep my reservation value really low. When it comes to business, what I mean by that is this: when you take, ideally, if you can take to the point of nothing to lose, you can do amazing things in life, because then you are not afraid of anything. Now, of course, I was not able to get to that point, but I always had this thing always in my mind, that, hey, I have capability. Worst come worst, I can go back to job, right? And I can go and find a job. And I always kept reminding myself throughout my journey, everywhere. I still think that way. That when I came to this country, I had only $250, right? So you cannot go below that. There's nothing to be worried about, right? So the thing is this, that of course it cannot be totally stupid either. So you have to take calculated risk and make things. I would say there were various times when it was really feeling, okay, is it time to quit, sort of a thing. So even as I said, when I started looking to do, I had quit my job and I was looking to do, my own startup, and I had certain, money reserve, and I had to think through that, hey, is it working or not working? And there was a time it came and I thought, okay, it's not working. Maybe I should go back to job, right? But then at that time, I gave myself, okay, let's just try till December or something, a few more months, okay? And then we'll see what happens. And things change in that, because when you are under so much pressure, you actually try even more harder. You turn every stone, go and talk to people you had not talked to, and so on. And interestingly enough, this is the time when I met Mudar and explained him the whole thing, and he explained, hey, this is what you should do. So it helped, it worked out. Similarly, in the early days of Cavium, there were times, because in our industry, it takes a long time to get the revenue, right? And especially after, in the first year of Cavium, 9/11 happened, and the whole industry had gone through this big, I should say, recession, right? And it was tough, we had to really keep our focus and keep our long-term goal in our mind to keep driving through.
I love that. And I think that I actually really love, like, when listening to you, it sounds like I always believe that, really good founders have conviction, like really strong conviction in what they're building. Cause I think, a lot of times with, like, even when we were talking about your journey, right, we're talking about the highlights constantly, but the lowlights, if you have conviction, you can get through the lowest parts of your journey. And then the second thing is grit, which, Angela Duckworth talks about as grit is the confluence of passion and determination, right? Of like really kind of being obsessive about the problem that you're solving and really kind of having the determination to see it through. And it sounds like, for sure you've had all of those things. Sajad basically just asked this question too, as we're talking about your customers and you guys being so customer focused, right? So when you were starting, how did you know, his question is, how did you know who your customers, how did you know who they would be? And how did you go about finding them?
So when, of course, I was in the industry itself, so it was not that difficult to know who are the biggest companies here that are building the system which will be used for networking and in a handling of internet data and so on. So knowing those customers was not that difficult. Now, getting to the right decision makers and so on was a little bit challenging initially. However, if you that is another advantage of being in the valley. If you are in the valley and if you have put together a good product plan, most of the companies will give you a chance to listen to your story once at least, right? So you can even reach to them in a cold call way that, hey, we have this thing, I want to come and pitch to you and so on. However, through your network, most of the time somebody in the company, and you can say, hey, I want to come and pitch this thing, and this is where another value of VC also add, because most of the time they have connections to somebody in the company and they can connect you. They can. So that's where I say there is a dumb money and there is a intelligent money, right? So when you're taking a investment, you should see who are you taking from, because another, just like your co-founder, that is investors are also your kind of life partner throughout the initial journey of the business. So first of all, they should understand the industry. They should understand, what are the challenges, what are the dynamics of that industry, and ideally they should know customers in that industry. So that also helps they can help open the door. Of course, after that you have to stand on your own feet, and you have to prove that your solution is value and creating value and so on. But at least they can make the connections.
Mohammed Athar, constantly asking good questions. Here's another good one. What was the inflection point, that aha moment that you had, especially as you said, it takes a long time to build revenue in the industry that you're in. What was that point where you were like, this is working, right? We're getting that traction that we needed. It took us this long to get there, but what was that aha moment for you?
So yeah, I know this is so much is talk about. There is one aha moment, but it's not really that way. It's a sequence of things that kind of build on top of each other. And this is where, when after a while you say, okay, fine, I have reached there. It seems like I was just walking. It's just like it's like a hike, climbing a mountain. You keep walking. At some point, you take a rest and look below, and you say, wow, I have climbed so much up. So that's where, so it doesn't come, in my mind, it doesn't come as an aha moment. It's more of a gradual development that helps you. However, when you win a big customer, big design, at that time you feel like, okay, fine, I'm stable. And this is what, when we had a big design win at Cisco, which has been since then our biggest, one of the big customer. So this is where when we say, okay, fine, we have this big design, and you know what, we have reached a level of stability.
I love that. And I also love that, I mean, you were talking about likening this to climbing a mountain. I think it's really good for people, like the type of person that you just mentioned yourself, was to look back and say, look at what I've achieved. A lot of people only look ahead, or like, look how much more I have to go, right? So to be that reflective in your journey is also really important, to look back and kind of be proud of the progress that you've made, right? So
that is true. So in my mind, the consistency and discipline is very important. I mean, you should focus, while you should have big dream and big goals, but you should divide it into smaller pieces and then have a consistent, think of it like doing one step at a time, right? So focus on making your next step very stable, become very good, very detailed, with a view, of course, I'm going to climb this mountain. Because if that step you made wrong, you will actually fall, you will not climb, right? So while it is important to have big dreams, big goals, and a plan to get there, but that is more of a little bit faded, as as you are walking in a fog, you do not really know where is the right path, right? I think startup is like that. You do not really know whether the path that I'm going is going to be the same path, or as I cross the next fog, I will find, oh, there's a better path, and I'll move it there and I'll go through that, right? So, but what is important in my mind are two things. One is the discipline of keep one step at a time, and having a very good clarity about the next step that you are putting, next where you're taking, because that can determine the direction. So it's a constant, I should say, alignment process with a discipline of one step at a time.
Yeah, it's a constant recalibration, right? Of like constantly just checking and seeing where you are. So on that, let's talk about the acquisition, right? And the decision. I mean, you've also said it's, in some ways, it was a bit of a merger as well, but 2017, Cavium, through this journey we've been talking about of like, going through the fog, like figuring things out, adjusting, learning. You were acquired by Marvell in 2017 for $6.7 billion, huge amount of money. But can you speak more to the decision to be acquired? Like what was that, I think in the semiconductor space, acquisitions are the norm. So that happens a lot, but obviously the decision to, by Marvell specifically, like what was it about them that spoke to you? Why was 2017 the year that was going to happen? So why them, and why that time?
So that's an excellent question, because as I said, that we had an offer pretty much every year to be by somebody to that who are reaching out to and getting acquired. But we never thought it's a good thing to do, and we kept building. Then why did we do ultimately? I would say that this is in a semiconductor industry, the scale is important, and as the process node is keep in kind of going lower and lower, the amount of investment needed to stay at the latest edge of the technology is keep increasing, right? So while Cavium was a good company, that we had grown it to a $1 billion run rate, we had good EBITDA income, but it was not good enough to be able to invest in the latest process node. And one of the key to success in semiconductor to be able to deliver product on the latest process node. So for us, there were two choices to scale. Either we acquire somebody, and it's not just acquiring one. Maybe we will have to acquire multiple to get to the point where we can invest. It's a several $100 million investment annually to be able to stay in the latest process node. Or maybe kind of work with somebody and put together a solution which will help us to grow further. So at that time, the conversation that we had in Marvell made a lot of sense, because Marvell had good, I should say, EBITDA income through the businesses that they had established, and we had a bunch of good technologies. So we sat together. We said, hey, if we combine these two companies, we can build a really data infrastructure focused company, because they had a storage leadership and they had networking. We had security and processors. So if we combine them, we can build the core building block which is needed for data. I mean, what do you need for if you believe in there's a lot of data being generated? What do? You need to store them. You need to secure them. You need to process them. You need to move around them. So the building blocks are really all these things. So we came up with this thing that, hey, we can actually put together a very interesting company which will have all these core strengths and purely data infrastructure focused company. And in fact, that's what we did. And over a period of next 3 years, we sold out some of the businesses which were not data infrastructure focused. We acquired a bunch of businesses which were data infrastructure focused. And as a result of that, we were able to completely pivot the company, the combined company, which is of course Marvell, to the pure play data infrastructure semiconductor. And it is also recognized by the customers and industry. As a result of that, today we are a leading semiconductor provider for 5G. We have a very kind of similar strong position in the data center, and the evolving areas like automotive, we have leading position. So those are the kind of result of all the I should say that thought process strategy that we have in place, and we work together to be able to come to this level, to this scale. I'm pretty sure Cavium alone couldn't do it, and even Marvell alone couldn't do it. So what we have today is a result of the strategy of working together and combining these companies and combining few more companies to get where we are. I mean, just to give an idea, as a result of that, I mean, when Cavium we were talking and the news of Marvell was acquiring it. I think the stock price of Marvell was in like teens. Today, I think it is 60. So within the 3 years, we were able to create a huge value, which is recognized by the industry and investors as well.
So now your current hat that you're wearing, after the acquisition / coming together of these entities, you are the president of products and technologies at Marvell. So from what's keeping you busy these days, and what is exciting you about the future of what you guys are building?
So in the reality, it's a semiconductor is like a treadmill. It's not a one-time thing. You did it once and life is good. In some ways, the overall semiconductor success is a long-term, kind of vision also, because in our industry, it takes 3 to 5 years before you start getting generating revenue out of a product. So you really have to envision how the world is going to be 5 years later, and then you have to start working on that something today. Obviously that's my passion. That's what I like doing. I like working closely with the customer. I like, finding the real problems. And to tell you the truth, finding the problem is the biggest part of a great product. Once you understand the problem, implementing a solution is not that. It's a matter of execution. So what keeps me excited and passionate is still the same, which I want to work with the customer. I want to find what challenges are they facing, and in fact I take it as those as an opportunity. And I have now an excellent team, I would say, we are excellent in many areas, especially for the data infrastructure. And we have this capability to bring all these IPs together to bring the innovative solution for our customers, and that's what I love to do.
That's great. And you're building the future. So, I mean, that's actually was part of the question that Maliha asked as well. What is your vision for the future?
So that's again a very interesting question. As I told you before, it's very similar to climbing on a mountain with a foggy environment, right? You can never say for sure, okay, this is what is going to be the future. What you do is this: you use your capabilities, you partner with your customers and partners, and focus on the goal where you're going. So I still believe that the data infrastructure is going to be the key behind all the things that we are talking, right? Whether we are talking about the AI and IoT and everything. If you go to the core of this, all these things are generating a lot of data, need to process a lot of data, need to store a lot of data, need to keep them secure, need to move them around in a very efficient way. So I believe as this AI is increasing, there will be a lot more innovations to do all these things in a much more efficient way, right? And that's our goal, is to be the semiconductor provider for the data infrastructure. And of course, we keep striving in every area to stay and become that.
Yeah, you need that constant level of curiosity, to what you were saying earlier, right? Of like constantly rethinking things and recalibrating. There's a lot of Pakistan related questions in here. Specifically, is Marvell working in Pakistan? How can Pakistan become a semiconductor design hub? Ali was asking, what are there plans, or how are you looking at Pakistan in comparison?
So of course I have looked several times in Pakistan. The one of the thing is this: it's a supply and demand. So what I mean by that is it's when we look at going into certain country or certain region, we look for few things. We look for the availability of resources, and we look for the overall infrastructure. We look for the of course political stability and overall governance, right? So I in the past I have tried few things directly through, let's say, Cavium and so on. It did not work really well because of the lack of semiconductor things. But recently, in fact, there's a very good friend of mine, Naveed Sherwani, who is doing few things, especially in the RISC-V side. So with that, I believe the overall, I should say, resource pool and awareness will improve. I have been advising few companies who are in the semiconductor, and especially opening offices in Pakistan. But there are challenges. In fact, I don't want to drag this discussion into those challenges, but this is an area I'm talking to. I talked to Consulate General of Pakistan also recently, and I'm talking to a few folks. How would we remove the hurdles of going to Pakistan? Like, for example, as simple as, let's say, a foreign company, if they simply want to open a bank account in Pakistan, it's almost impossible. It's such a nightmare. And then when those CEO call me and say, "Hey, Raghib, how would we pay our employees? I cannot even open the bank account."
Yeah.
And this is when I called the Consulate General. But I understand the challenges. Somebody I'll really appreciate can step up and solve those, because I'm not a financial guy, so I do not know exactly what are the challenges, but I know it is challenging for a company to do something like that. Similarly, there are issues around the IP, ownership and law.
Yep.
So those should also be improved. So I believe there are a bunch of things that needs to be done, and together we can do to improve overall situation.
Yeah. If anyone from the Pakistani government is listening to this talk right now, you know what you got to do, guys, to make it better for players to come into the market. And that's something that we obsess about all the time in what we do as well, in terms of changing how we improve the regulatory barriers in Pakistan. And I actually do want to talk a little bit more about founders in Pakistan, right? There's probably a lot of founders here that are operating in Pakistan, founders anywhere. But what would, the market itself in Pakistan, as you know, Raghib, has been growing significantly actually in the last 18 months. Yeah, we've seen, Kleiner Perkins put money into the country. Like a lot of deals that I've been in have been international funds that are leading rounds. Obviously with Ali and the Bak Launch Group, they've, facilitated so many investments into Pakistani startups. So the market is growing really, really fast. Sometimes some people would argue maybe a little too fast. So what would be the advice that you would give to young founders?
So I'll give a little bit broader view first, and before focusing on the topic. In my view, there is in our life, every once in a while there is an event which is called a black swan event, which is kind of rare event, right? Mm-hmm. I think we have just gone through that, and which is of course COVID. We have already experienced a lot of the way doing businesses has already started changing because of that, right? I believe this will generate a lot more opportunities globally, because the way we do live and work and play, everything will change. It can never go back to the way it was, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that disruption is a big opportunity, because then everything you do, you should question, okay, do I still have to do in the new world the same way? And what could I do better? What could I do in a more efficient way? And that will actually will push you to think beyond your box, beyond what is the limitation of our knowledge and norms, right? So I suggest everybody to look everything with a question that, hey, just because it is the more established way, is it the right way, and or not? Now, we are also very lucky. Especially the young generation who is there right now, compared to if I compare myself when I was there, the access to knowledge is pretty much even now all over the world. So it is what is accessible to somebody in Silicon Valley is the same thing is available in let's say in a city in Pakistan, right? So use that knowledge and look at, especially instead of worrying about the global market, look at the local market itself, mm-hmm. because a lot of things which are happening somewhere else needs to be customized. So this is where I will encourage everybody to have a thought process of not consumer but creator, right? Mm. Because yes, there are great applications, let's say, or great things like Airbnb or Uber or Facebook and so on. But instead of just following it and using it as it is, there's a lot more room to see how can I make it more relevant to the local market. I just came across a founder of a company actually, and in fact, Kareem also did the same thing. What Kareem did, kind of customized the concept of Uber in a local way. Yeah. Now, this company also customized the same concept in local ways in Russia, and it's growing very fast. It's a pretty big company. And the very basic thing, they said that, hey, in our culture, there's no this fixed cost concept. We always negotiate. Mm-hmm. So they just enable that in the platform that, hey, you just negotiate, ask your own price. I wanna get this thing. I wanna go from point A to B. I wanna pay this much. Who is willing to take it, sort of a thing? And they kind of made it more of a marketplace rather than just a service app, right? Hmm. There are many such applications these days which are kind of service solutions, I think all of them have a potential to be converted into local marketplaces, adapting to the local norms, right? This is very important. Nobody else can understand it better than the local people on the ground, right?
Totally.
I mean, somebody sitting in America cannot think, oh, what is the right way of, delivering food in Pakistan? It is kind of very hard for them to conceive that, right? But it is very easy for somebody who is running into that problem on a daily basis, right? So I would say the world is going through this virtualization effect, the whole fintech effect, the whole ease of use effect, and the marketplace. I encourage everybody to look at the local problem, the problem that you are facing on a daily basis in that environment, and see, hey, what can be done to do it better? That's a huge opportunity. It's a 200. I do not even remember exactly how many population is. Pakistan is 200 something million people, right?
Probably plus
220.
now. Yeah, fifth largest country in the world right now. So
so that's what I'm saying. So it's a big market. So instead of letting other people take that market, why don't you create your own value for that market? It's a huge business.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, right? So even to your journey, so much of what you were saying about, why Cavium in hindsight was so successful is because you were so customer centric and like listening to the customer. And so similar to what you said, for people operating in Pakistan, it's about placing the Pakistani consumer at the center of your design and not just copying and pasting what we've seen elsewhere. And I think we're seeing that with a lot of models throughout Southeast Asia and the Middle East, is like people launching, the Gojek, by Kia is the Gojek of Pakistan, but Munib, as an example, has really localized it for Pakistan, even in terms of how they interact with their riders and things like that. So I think the importance and the key to success is being customer centric in that way. So a couple questions in here, but one thing that I did want to ask is, you've obviously raised money from venture capital. What would be your advice to founders that are raising money in terms of how they position themselves to venture capital funds, either locally or internationally? What would be the advice that you give, even from your own experience?
Yeah, so I think that is a very good question. And if I advise myself, 30 years back, one thing I would like everybody to do is to understand accounting and finance a little better, because that actually helps you, putting your passion into perspective, right? A lot of people have a lot of passion, but if you do not put it into the perspective in the financial world, it is hard to convey to the investor. So if you can define what is especially in an evolving world, what will be the potential TAM and potential SAM, right? That is really where you can create differentiation and convince the investor that, hey, it may sound small today, but it is, look at this, has this much potential, and it can become this thing, let's say 10 years from now, and so on, right? And of course, if you focus on a real problem, which is a not hypothetical problem, but a real problem which serves a real need, and if you have a differentiated solution for that, which can bring your product to the limelight, that will be beautiful.
We have 5 minutes left together, so I'm going to try to get to some more of the questions that are in this chat. And to actually your point about, wishing you had done accounting and finance. But Bilal Mansour actually asked a great question here on that line, which is, if you had a do-over, would you still do it? And what would you have done differently?
That's a very interesting question. So this question, I think, is, again, as I said, in retrospect, everything looks very logical and so on. But in reality, it is like walking into a fog. It is not that clear, right? Would I still, if I do go back, would I still do Cavium? Probably I will do. Would I still focus on data infrastructure? I will still do. But maybe there are few things maybe I could do differently. So maybe I would tell that Raghib to be a bit more relaxed rather than so high anxiety. And the second thing, probably in certain areas a bit more aggressive than what would have been.
Love that. Okay, last, we were talking about what you read in terms of your own education. You know, you read a lot of like poetry and things like that. What's on your reading list these days? What are you reading right now?
So that is very interesting question. In fact, I am kind of taking some time right now and going through some Stanford programs. As a result of that, there are lots of books which are actually on my reading list right now. But I am more and more into understanding human psychology, because I believe at the end of the day, if you can understand people better, you can always find a better product, better solution for them. So my focus has been, I mean, I can send you later on the list of the books that I on my list right now, but my focus is more about understanding cultures, understanding human beings.
I love that. I mean, that's kind of like, there's so many great books that are out there that are on those topics as well. So love that. Okay, we have 3 minutes. So I'm going to get to a question about semiconductor industry. So Hamad asked, and Dr. Ali Ahmed also asked, so Ali asked, how can we create semiconductor resources in Pakistan that can work remotely from Pakistan, if you have thoughts on that? And Hamad asked, it would be great to have your views on the US versus China in the semiconductor race. Not easy questions.
That's very good. So I believe is creating semiconductor resources will only happen by having more and more companies creating the real job over there. So as I said, I am myself am looking very closely, but at the same time, easiest thing is for startups to go there. So I am working with few startups who have actually open or trying to open offices over there. That will automatically generate more resources. However, I am also very pleased with some of the things I just saw this morning. Government of Punjab actually has made like a microelectronics as a one focus area or something, and they are going to fund something about that. So which was a good news. So I believe that overall increase of resources will help in improving the industry, the overall semiconductor industry. Now, on the second question, my thoughts, I believe the overall, of course, I don't want to take a position here, and it's not in the best interest, but there has been a lot of geopolitical, tension, and because of that, it's more of a becoming. China has gone on a path to have what they call the semiconductor independence, but in reality, there will still be a lot of interdependence between these countries. So I believe we will have to see there are areas where there will be more cooperation between the countries. There will be an area where will be more competition. And as a semiconductor company, we have to walk that fine line and see which areas we can work together and which areas we cannot, sort of a thing. But I believe, of course, China is a big market, and they are focused on developing a lot of semiconductors themselves. So they are going to improve overall ability over time.
Amazing. Last way to just kind of end this session today. Raghib, it's been such a pleasure to host this, deeply inspiring, and love that we didn't just talk about, just direct business journey, but also all the other things around it. Can you leave us with some parting thoughts to this audience that, spent their Sunday with you, part of their Sunday with you? What are your parting thoughts or advice that you would give?
Yeah, so I would like to encourage, as I said, in any success, there are three components, right? As I said, you cannot be MVP unless you are a great player and playing that day, and your luck. So luck is a part, constant factor. I completely agree with that. But in reality, your preparedness and your knowledge of the field also help real well. I would say you guys are much more luckier than me when I was there, because the access of information that you have, and all the platform that you already have available is amazing. It's a matter of you finding a problem and solving that problem for the real problem, which will create the value. So in that way, I would say you're really lucky. You just need to dream big, define your goal, but at the same time, define a step to get to that goal, and keep the discipline and keep the consistency, and you'll get there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Raghib, for allowing me the privilege of moderating this session today. Thank you to Ali and the Bach Launch team for constantly creating amazing space for conversations like these. And if those of you probably have heard, but on September 8th, there will be a Bach Launch conference with a lot of international investors that will be there. So be sure to attend that. But to Raghib, thank you so much for today and for giving us so much amazing knowledge and nuggets of wisdom that we can walk away at the end of our weekend with.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.